Part 1. Stop everything you are doing right now and listen to this, because what I am about to tell you could literally save you or cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on whether you understand it correctly. There is a rule inside Social Security right now that most people have never heard of, and this rule is actively stealing money from millions of hardworking Americans every single month. You go to work, you earn your paycheck, you pay your taxes, and then Social Security turns around and says, because you earned too much this year, we are keeping your benefits. Not some of your benefits, nearly all of them. 11 out of 12 monthly checks gone, vanished, kept by the government because you had the audacity to remain a productive working citizen while also trying to collect benefits you already spent a lifetime paying for. And here's the part that should make you pay very close attention. A bill has just been introduced in Congress that would destroy this rule entirely, wipe it off the face of the earth, never to return. If it passes, everything changes. If it does not pass, you need to understand exactly how this rule works, so it does not destroy your retirement plan. Either way, what you learn in the next few minutes is going to be some of the most valuable financial information you have ever received. The bill is called the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026. It was introduced by Republican lawmakers who argue that no American should ever face a financial punishment for choosing to continue working while collecting Social Security benefits they have already earned through decades of mandatory payroll contributions. The specific target of this legislation is the Social Security Retirement Earnings Test. If this bill is signed into law, the earnings test disappears completely and permanently. No more income thresholds, no more benefit withholding, no more months of suspended checks. You would receive your full Social Security benefit every single month, regardless of how much money you earn from employment. This is not a minor procedural update. This is a fundamental restructuring of how Social Security treats working Americans who have chosen to begin their benefits before full retirement age. The potential impact of this legislation reaches into the lives of millions of people across the country. Right now, there are Americans who are terrified to file for Social Security because they have heard vague warnings about the earnings test, but do not understand exactly what it means. There are people who have already filed and are watching in horror as their monthly checks disappear one after another, with no clear explanation of why or whether the money will ever come back. There are people who have quit jobs they loved, turned down promotions they deserved, and refused raises they had earned, all because they were trying to stay below an income threshold that they barely understand. And there are people who have made permanent, irreversible decisions about when to start their benefits based entirely on fear and confusion surrounding this one rule, decisions that will cost them staggering amounts of money over the course of their remaining lifetimes. Today, I am going to take this entire subject apart and put it back together in a way that makes complete sense, so you can make informed decisions about your own retirement, regardless of what Congress ultimately decides to do. The earnings test did not appear out of nowhere. It has been part of Social Security since the very first day the program existed. To understand why it was created, you have to transport yourself back to 1935 and the world that existed when Social Security was born. America was mired in the Great Depression. The economy had collapsed, banks had failed, unemployment was epidemic, and older Americans were among the most vulnerable and devastated populations in the country. They had no employer pensions, they had no personal savings left after the crash. They had no ability to find work in a labor market that could not even employ young, able-bodied workers. Social Security was designed specifically for these people. It was a financial lifeline for older Americans who had left the workforce permanently and had no other source of income to sustain them. The earnings test was the mechanism that enforced this design philosophy. If you are still working, you are not retired. If you are not retired, you do not need retirement benefits. If you try to collect retirement benefits while you are still earning money, we will reduce what you receive because clearly you have not yet reached the point of financial need that this program was built to address. That philosophy governed Social Security for over 6 decades without significant challenge. But as the American economy evolved and as life expectancy extended dramatically, and as the nature of work shifted from physically punishing manual labor to knowledge-based careers that could be sustained comfortably into one's 7th and 8th decades of life, the earnings test began to look increasingly archaic and counterproductive. By the late 1990s, it had become abundantly clear that the earnings test was doing more harm than good for a large segment of the older American population. People were making irrational economic decisions specifically to avoid the penalty. They were leaving the workforce prematurely. They were reducing their hours and their income artificially. They were depriving employers of experienced, valuable workers. and they were depriving the economy of productive contributors. Congress responded in the year 2000 by passing legislation that eliminated the earnings test for anyone at or above their full retirement age. That was a transformative change. From that day forward, once you reached full retirement age, you could earn any amount of money from any type of employment and keep every single dollar of your Social Security benefit with zero withholding and zero penalty. That freedom remains the law today. But here is the catch that continues to trap millions of Americans. For everyone who claims benefits before full retirement age, the earnings test still exists and still operates at full strength. If you begin your Social Security at 62 or 63 or 64 or 65 and you are still working and earning income from employment, you are subject to the current earnings test rules. And those rules can be financially devastating depending on your income level. Under the 2026 rules currently in force, if you are below your full retirement age for the entire year, you may earn up to $24,480 without any effect on your Social Security payments. That is the annual exempt amount. But every dollar you earn from work above that $24,480 threshold triggers a benefit reduction. Social Security withholds $1 of your benefits for every $2 you earn above the limit. That creates an effective 50% withholding rate on all excess earnings. In the calendar year during which you actually reach your full retirement age, the formula becomes somewhat less severe. The exempt amount rises to $65,160, and only your earnings before your birthday month are counted. The withholding rate also drops to $1 for every $3 over the limit. After your full retirement age month arrives, the earnings test ceases to apply permanently, and you are free to earn without restriction. Let me demonstrate the real-world devastation this causes with a specific numerical example. You are 63 years old. You have started your Social Security benefits and you receive $2,000 per month, which equals $24,000 per year. You're also still employed at your job earning $70,000 per year. You might assume you will enjoy both income streams simultaneously. Here is reality under current law. Social Security subtracts the $24,480 exempt amount from your $70,000 in earnings. That produces $45,520 in excess earnings. They then apply the withholding formula of $1 for every $2 of excess. That means $22,760 of your Social Security benefits are withheld for that year. Out of your $24,000 annual benefit, you are left with just $1,240. Practically speaking, Social Security implements this by suspending your monthly checks entirely starting at the beginning of the year. They withhold your full $2,000 payment in January, then February, then March, continuing month after month until the full withholding obligation is met. In this case, they would suspend 11 consecutive monthly checks totaling $22,000 and then take an additional $760 from your 12th month payment to satisfy the $22,760 requirement. You go almost the entire year without receiving a single full Social Security payment. If the proposed legislation passes, that entire $22,760 withholding simply does not happen. It ceases to exist as a concept. Your $2,000 check arrives every single month without interruption, no matter what your employer pays you. The earnings test is gone, and with it goes the entire apparatus of thresholds and formulas and suspended payments that currently governs early claimants who work. There is, however, one critically important fact about the current system that you must understand, because not understanding it is what causes people to make their worst financial mistakes. The money that Social Security withholds from you under the earnings test is not permanently gone. It is not confiscated. It is not a tax that disappears into a government account, never to return. This is the single most misunderstood truth about the entire earnings test, and the failure to understand it drives people into decisions that cost them dearly. Here is what actually happens. When you reach your full retirement age, Social Security performs an automatic recalculation of your monthly benefit. They go back through your records and identify every month in which your payment was fully or partially withheld due to the earnings test. They then increase your monthly benefit going forward to give you actuarial credit for those months of withheld payments. Your new higher monthly payment from full retirement age onward is designed to gradually compensate you over time for the benefits you missed during your working years. In purely technical terms, the earnings test is a deferral mechanism rather than a permanent forfeiture. But the practical human reality is dramatically different from the technical reality. People do not experience this as a deferral. They experience it as a punishment. They watch their checks stop arriving. They feel angry and confused. They feel penalized for working. And because Social Security does an abysmal job of explaining the recalculation that occurs later, people react emotionally in ways that damage their financial futures. They quit jobs to stop the withholding even when their employment income far exceeds their benefit amount. They avoid filing for benefits during years when filing might actually serve their household strategy. They make reactive panic decisions instead of calculated strategic ones. The confusion surrounding this single rule has collectively cost American retirees billions of dollars in suboptimal outcomes over the decades it has been in effect. Part 2. Let me now address the counter-arguments because intellectual honesty demands acknowledging that this issue has two legitimate sides. Not every policy expert believes eliminating the earnings test would be beneficial. Some argue, quite persuasively, that the test serves a protective function that would be dangerous to remove. Their argument begins with a philosophical point about the purpose of Social Security itself. The program was built as retirement insurance. It exists to protect people who have left the workforce from financial destitution. It was not constructed as supplemental income for people still drawing full salaries from their employers. When you remove the earnings test, you fundamentally change the character of the program for early claimants. You transform it from a retirement safety net into something closer to an unconditional payment that begins at 62, regardless of whether you need it or have in any meaningful sense retired. The behavioral concern is even more compelling. Without the earnings test creating a visible immediate cost to claiming early while working, policy critics predict that millions of additional Americans would file for benefits at 62 purely because they can. The money would appear to be sitting there with no strings attached. Why would anyone leave free money on the table? But that money is not free. There is an enormous invisible cost that most people do not perceive until it is far too late to reverse. Claiming at 62 permanently reduces your monthly benefit by roughly 25 to 30% compared to waiting until your full retirement age of 67. That reduction applies to every single payment for the rest of your life. It applies to every future cost of living adjustment. It compounds year after year into a growing gap between what you receive and what you could have received. For someone who lives to 85 or beyond, and statistically a substantial percentage of 62-year-olds today will reach that age, the lifetime cost of that decision can exceed $200,000 or more. If eliminating the earnings test triggers a wave of uninformed early claiming, many of those claimants will find themselves financially strained in their late 70s and 80s. They will be locked into permanently reduced payments during the exact years when medical costs are highest, when the ability to earn supplemental income is most diminished, and when financial vulnerability is most acute. The earnings test in this interpretation acts as an accidental protective barrier. It does not prevent early claiming outright, but it reduces the incentive to claim while working, which indirectly causes many people to delay and thereby receive higher lifetime benefits. The funding dimension also merits serious discussion. Social Security faces well-documented long-term financial challenges. The trustees' report has shown for years that, absent legislative changes, the trust funds will eventually be unable to pay scheduled benefits in full from incoming revenue alone. Eliminating the earnings test would accelerate benefit payouts in the near term. More people would claim earlier and receive full payments immediately, rather than having portions withheld and paid back later, through higher monthly amounts. This acceleration is modest relative to the overall size of the program, but it adds incremental strain to a system already under significant pressure. In policy terms, every reform that increases short-term outflows without a corresponding increase in revenue makes the long-term sustainability math more difficult. Historical context matters here as well. A similar bill was introduced in a prior congressional session, and it went nowhere. It was sent to committee and never emerged for a floor vote. The political appetite for this type of reform has historically been insufficient to overcome the institutional inertia and the legitimate policy concerns raised by opponents. The current 2026 version of the bill is generating more momentum than its predecessors, primarily because the demographic trend of working past traditional retirement ages has become so pronounced that ignoring it is politically untenable. More constituents are contacting their representatives about this issue. More media attention is being paid to the problems the earnings test creates. But momentum and passage are very different things. Until this bill clears both the House and Senate and receives a presidential signature, it remains a proposal, not a reality. Plan accordingly. Hope for its passage if you believe it would benefit you, but do not make irrevocable financial decisions based on its anticipated passage. Now let us talk about what this means strategically for you as an individual. If this bill becomes law, the practical implication is straightforward. You could be 62 years old earning $80,000 or $100,000 or any amount from your job and simultaneously collect your full Social Security benefit every single month with zero withholding. There would be no income threshold to worry about, no formula calculating how much gets taken back, no months of missing payments. Your benefit would simply arrive in full, on schedule, alongside your paycheck. But taxation remains a completely separate issue that the elimination of the earnings test does not address. Federal income tax on Social Security benefits is governed by an entirely different set of rules that operate independently of the earnings test. If you are 62 years old earning $80,000 from employment and also collecting Social Security, your benefits will be subject to federal income tax based on your provisional income calculation. The senior standard deduction, providing an additional $6,000 above the regular deduction amount, does not become available until you reach age 65. As a 62-year-old single filer with $80,000 in wages plus Social Security income, 85% of your Social Security benefits would be taxable. That produces roughly $4,488 in federal income tax attributable solely to your Social Security payments on top of all the taxes you already owe on your employment earnings. Eliminating the earnings test eliminates the benefit withholding. It does not eliminate the tax consequences of collecting Social Security while earning employment income. These are distinct systems, and you must plan for both. And now, I need to address what is unquestionably the most dangerous misunderstanding circulating about this legislation. Every single person watching this needs to burn the following distinction into their memory, because getting it wrong could cost you a fortune. The elimination of the earnings test is not the same thing as the elimination of the early claiming reduction. These are two completely separate, independent, unrelated provisions of Social Security law. The bill eliminates only the earnings test. It does not touch, modify, or in any way alter the permanent mathematical reduction that applies to your benefit when you claim before full retirement age. These two things have nothing to do with each other. If you file for Social Security at 62, your monthly benefit is permanently reduced by approximately 30%, compared to what it would be at your full retirement age of 67. If you compare filing at 62 to waiting until 70, the gap widens to approximately 76%. That means waiting until 70 would give you 76% more money every single month for every remaining month of your life. This reduction has nothing to do with the earnings test. It is calculated purely based on the number of months you file before your full retirement age. It is built into the core benefit formula, and this bill does not change that formula at all. Not by a single dollar, not by a single percentage point. The danger is that people hear the earnings test is eliminated, and they conclude incorrectly that there is now no penalty whatsoever for claiming at 62. They rush to file thinking the money is free with no downside. But the permanent reduction is very much still there, silently cutting their monthly payment by 25 or 30% for the rest of their lives. At age 75, when their savings are running lower and their expenses are running higher, that missing 30% becomes painfully real. At age 85, when medical costs may be enormous, that missing 30% could mean the difference between comfort and hardship. The decision about when to claim Social Security is arguably the single most impactful financial decision most Americans will make in their entire lives. The difference between doing it right and doing it wrong is measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars over a typical retirement. I am not telling you to never claim early. That would be irresponsible because there are genuinely valid reasons why claiming at 62 is the right choice for specific people in specific circumstances. If your health is severely compromised and you have medical reason to believe your lifespan will be significantly shorter than average, claiming early maximizes what you receive from the system. If you have been involuntarily separated from employment and have no other income to cover your immediate expenses, claiming early may be a financial necessity. If you are part of a married couple implementing a coordinated household strategy, where one spouse claims early to provide bridge income, while the other delays until 70 to maximize survivor benefits, that early claim serves a deliberate strategic purpose. But in every single one of those cases, the decision is being made with full awareness of the trade-offs involved. It is being made based on specific personal numbers and circumstances. It is being made deliberately and strategically rather than casually or emotionally. That is the standard you must hold yourself to. Whether the earnings test is eliminated or whether it remains in force, your approach to Social Security should always be grounded in comprehensive understanding of how every piece of the system interacts with your unique situation. your claiming age, your employment income, your tax bracket, your marital status, your spouse's benefit amount, your health, your life expectancy, your other retirement savings, your pension income, if any, your monthly expenses, your risk tolerance. All of these factors feed into the optimal decision for you specifically. What works brilliantly for your neighbor might be catastrophic for you. What a friend did successfully might be exactly the wrong move given your circumstances. Stay informed about this legislation. Watch whether it advances through committee and toward a vote. Understand what it would mean for your particular situation if it passes. But never let a single piece of pending legislation drive you into a hasty, permanent decision. Plan based on the rules that exist right now while maintaining flexibility to adapt if those rules change. Protect your future self by making decisions today that you will thank yourself for 20 years from now. The financial security of your later decades depends entirely on the quality of the choices you make during these pivotal years. Make those choices wisely, make them strategically, and make them with complete information. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. The Retirement Desk.